There has been a lot of hand-wringing lately about how ChatGPT and AI in general is going to ruin how students learn. It's going to make everything so easy and it's going to dumb down everybody that's going through the educational system right now. But the data tells a very different story. This is a meta-analysis paper. So they looked at a bunch of papers and tried to abstract the findings from all those papers, which looks at the effect of ChatGPT on students' learning performance, learning perception, and higher order thinking. Let's quickly talk about the definitions of these terms before we get into the main results. Learning performance is the most common thing that people look at, and that is the academic achievement as measured by tests and exams or formal quizzing. So, this is your score or your grade. And that is the main thing a lot of people look at. Learning perception is a bit more subjective. This measures the student's attitude towards their learning, how motivated they feel, how interested they are, whether they're satisfied with their learning experience. And higher order thinking encompasses a bunch of different things like advanced cognitive abilities and reflection. These things go beyond just remembering things or performing well on an exam. This includes things like critical thinking, being creative, problem solving, and metacognition, thinking about how you're learning and trying to improve the ways in which you're learning. Let's jump right to the results. On learning performance, they found a very high effect size of ChatGPT increasing learning performance. I'll talk about what this G measure means in a minute. For learning perception and higher order thinking, the effect size was around zero point 0.5, which is considered medium. So, what exactly does this number G mean? This is called Hedges G, and it is a way to measure standardized mean difference, which is a fancy way of saying that if you have many studies using many different measures to compare some effect between two groups, an experiment group and a control group, it tries to normalize those differences and express them in one common normalized way. So it lets you compare results across different studies that might have used different scales or different tests. So when we say the Hedges G measure was 0.867 for learning performance, the way to interpret that is that on average, students that used ChatGPT performed approximately 0.867 standard deviations better than students who didn't. And the same for learning perception and high order thinking. Those that used ChatGPT performed about half a standard deviation, 0.45 standard deviation, better than those who didn't. And when looking at this G measure, zero point 0.8 or above is considered to be a very large effect size. Around 0.5 is considered to be a medium effect size. And zooming out to look at how they got this ground truth, they first did a very broad search looking at ChatGPT and learning and keywords like that and came up with several thousand articles. And then they kept weeding out articles that didn't have the right experiment structure or the right control groups, etc., until they landed up with 51 studies that they deemed were rigorous and proper enough to include in this meta-analysis. So overall, this meta-analysis of a bunch of papers, I think, proves a lot of naysayers and worriers wrong in that no, ChatGPT isn't ruining students. There's a bunch of nuance in there in terms of the effect size being larger for certain kinds of courses or for certain lengths of courses. So I'd encourage you to read the full paper. One major critique I have for the paper is that it only looks at ChatGPT and not all the other AI tools like, say, Claude or Gemini, because there's LLMs other than ChatGPT. That's one. And the other thing is that they look at ChatGPT as one monolithic product. They don't report on which specific model within ChatGPT the students were using. So was it GPT 3.5, which is ancient at this point, or GPT 4 or 4.0, or maybe some of the more recent reasoning models? Because the models have also been improving by leaps and bounds in the last couple of years. So depending on the model, you could see very different effects, but they didn't look at the specific model. But overall, this is a very positive result. They have a lot of good data backing this. And so maybe the kids are all right. All right. Thanks. Bye.